everybody, I'm back. We're going to read chapter 2 of Coming to England by Floella Benjamin, and we're on this chapter, which is school life, and there's a lovely illustration there. And here we go. So chapter 2, school life. The first school I ever went to was not far from my house. I was 4 years old at the time, and every morning Sandra and I would walk there, dressed in our white blouses and blue tunics, our hair plaited immaculately. Mama used to inspect us before we left because the teachers were very strict about school uniform and everything else, come to think of it, a bit like us. Each morning there would be an inspection by the headmistress to make sure our nails, clothes and shoes were clean. We'd have to line up in the schoolyard, and the latecomers would try to sneak on the end of the lines, but the headmistress seemed to have eyes in the back of her head and would always spot them. I was late once and I thought I'd catch her out. I willed myself to be invisible. I felt sure I could sneak in and attach myself to the line without being seen. But no, old Hawkeye's caught sight of me. It was the moment I had feared. I'd seen other children cry out as thick leather belt was brought down from high above onto the palm of their hand. Now it was my turn to face the executioner. I slowly walked forward, my feet as heavy as lead weights, my heart thumping like kettle drums, all eyes staring at me. And when I reached the front line, I turned my face away and closed my eyes as the belt came down with a crack. And then it was over. I barely felt it. The fear of receiving the punishment was far worse than the actual lash itself. But I didn't ever want to go through that torment again. So from then on, I made sure I was never late or dared to do anything wrong at school. Remember that. The school was a big timber building on 2 floors with a staircase on the outside leading to the upper floor. The classrooms were separated by wooden partitions. In front of the rows of wooden desks was a large blackboard, and next to it was the teacher's desk. We were never allowed to speak in class unless spoken to. Everyone had great respect and admiration for the teachers, who were firm but friendly. They stood for no nonsense. Most had dedicated their lives to teaching, and their expectations of us were very high. We were taught the British way, the 3 R's, reading, writing and arithmetic, because it was considered to be the best education in the world. As we were colonised and ruled by Britain before the island became independent, all our textbooks came from England and were precious to us. Do you remember we asked you to do some work on the Windrush? Yeah, so maybe you'll have a little bit of insight into that. Each morning before schoolwork, we'd have had to sing God Save the Queen, Rule Britannia and Land of Hope and Glory. We were encouraged to feel proud that we were British and even celebrated British Memorial Days like Remembrance Day. The poppies looked striking on our royal blue uniforms, and every day we went through the ritual of saying our times table, the whole class reciting as one. I can still hear the sing-song chanting in my ears, and occasionally the headmistress would randomly single out an unsuspecting pupil and ask them to repeat their tables. You never knew when it would be your turn, so you had to be sure you knew them all by heart. It must have worked because I've never forgotten mine. We also learned about Britain and how the British conquered the world. We learned about the heroes of British history and other countries in the world, but nothing at all about our own people. We even learned about British poets. My favourite was Alfred Lord Tennyson, and by the age of 6, I could fluently recite his poem, The Beggar Maid. I can still remember the first lines. Her arms across her breast she laid, she was more fair than words can say. The best time at school was break time. The recess bell would go and we'd file out into the schoolyard in an orderly way. But once we were outside, we would let rip. It was time to let off the pent-up energy, time to shout, scream, laugh and play with our friends. Skipping and hopscotch were 2 of my favourite games, as well as action and clapping games, to which we would sing Brown Girl in the Ring and I Am a Pretty Little Dutch Girl. I also used to look forward to seeing the woman who sold treats. She sat on a stool with a tray in front of her laden with goodies. Pink and white sugar cake, which was grated coconut, sugar and colouring. Touloons, a mixture of grated coconut and molasses. Chana, fried chickpeas, spicy marinated mangoes and snowballs, which were crushed ice over covered in fruit syrup, all on sale for a few cents. That is delicious. The worst part I could never decide what to have. And I sometimes wish break time would go on forever so I could try them all. At lunchtime, everyone went home to eat, as most of our mothers always stayed at home and rarely went out to work. Sandra and I would hold hands and walk back home, always on the right side of the busy main road because the cars drove on the left, just as they do in England. We had to be careful as we walked along because there were no pavements and the big American cars, single-deck buses and wooden trucks were always driven far too fast along the narrow tarmac roads. An hour after one of Marmy's delicious hot-cooked meals, we were on our way back to school for the afternoon lessons. Sometimes we would have nature classes in which we learned about insects, birds and flowers. I remember the fascination of discovering how a chrysalis turns into a butterfly. And for days we watched and waited to see the transformation. And when it came, it was like a miracle. I marvelled at the sight of the delicate, brightly coloured newborn creature. I treasured the moment and it locked it away in my mind, together with all the other unforgettable memories of my early school days. We'll read chapter 3 tomorrow. Bye.